This isn't the first video I've done since cutting my hair, but I feel like this is the first video that I'll be like actually posting, so I cut my hair. Hi there, welcome back to Writing Werewolf. My name is Bethany and today we're going to be doing a 5-minute review. This is a special 5-minute review though, because due to the fact that I haven't posted anything in ages, this will be a double feature. So 10-minute review, I guess. Today we're going to be discussing Paul Yoder's Shadow of the Arisen and Lords of the Sand, which he was kind enough to send to me. It's a really interesting concept. So the first book follows this group of adventurers as they go on a reconnaissance mission in order to investigate the threat of the Arisen army, which is an army of kind of like zombies, I guess. They're the undead, basically. And the absolute chaos that goes on following this and their encounters with the Lords of the Deep Hells. The second book carries on from that. It's not exactly straight on afterwards, but it's close enough. The second book then focuses on the aftermath of that reconnaissance mission and the sort of impending war that comes after that. I really enjoyed the concept, I really enjoyed the plot of these, I really enjoyed the characters. I did have some issues with some of the other things, which I'll get to in a moment. But I'm going to do them one at a time and then we'll discuss the flaws afterwards. So Shadow of the Arisen is the first book in this series. It will be a trilogy, and then there will be lots of other books afterwards set in the same sort of world. In one of the author's notes at the end, in the like sort of acknowledgement sections, it does say that Paul Yoder does write that he will be doing more, I guess, or writing like a book a year set in this land. Shadow of the Arisen, you start off with this, I think there's about 6 or 7 characters in this, like sort of main characters in this wee band of adventurers, and all of them, I loved all of them. They were all unique, they were all sort of 3-dimensional, they all had their flaws, they all had their strengths and their weaknesses. They worked really well as a group. I liked the interactions that they had. I thought their relationships, some of them already knew each other before beginning and then others sort of joined in. I thought their relationships sort of grew and developed as they would normally, and I thought that was a really nice touch. I thought the topic of the undead was really well done in this fantasy novel. Sometimes it can stray a bit too far into sci-fi, but I thought this was really well done in this one. I thought the world building was incredible. That was something that I wanted more of, because there isn't a lot of sort of descriptions of cities and such in this one, and like culture, because obviously they're just going into this army of the undead. That gets developed a lot in book 2, which I really enjoyed. It feel a little bit like a D&D campaign. Every single person in the group sort of fell into a role that you would find in a D&D campaign. There's nothing wrong with that. I just thought it was interesting. It's interesting to point out that these are the sort of roles that fantasy adventure novels kind of fall into, I guess. I did think one of the absolute strengths of this book are the fight scenes, obviously because it's a reconnaissance mission. There's going to be fighting, there's going to be, you know, hand-to-hand combat, and I thought that was written excellently. A lot of the time when you read a book like that, it comes up and it's really repetitive and quite boring, or it's just skimmed over entirely. But these fight scenes were a nice mix of detailed enough to be interesting, but not repetitive or overwritten or anything like that. I like how at the end the story continued past the final fight. There was a wee bit afterwards showing the aftermath, and I really liked that. And I especially liked how the final fight was done. Lords of the Sands is the second in this trilogy. The third one will be released next year, I think. Lords of the Sands very much suffers from second book syndrome, as in it does feel a lot like filler and like sort of info dumping for the third book. There's nothing wrong with that. Some people enjoy that. I found it a bit difficult to get through sort of the last sort of quarter, purely because it felt like it was building up to something and it never got there, it never paid off, because obviously that final fight is being saved for the last book. But I thought it would have easily fitted in there. I thought the build-up was a bit wasted in that case. With that being said, I still like the original characters. I did think there were a bit too many characters in this book though, because on the top of the original 6, who are now all split up, you also have new characters, you've got new groups forming, and it got a wee bit difficult to keep track of. I think balancing a lot of characters, such a large ensemble cast like this book has, is a real skill, and I think that it's easy to get wrong. And I think that's what happened here. It just got a bit muddled. There were a couple of storylines that just seemed to have just dropped in the last sort of quarter that concerned some of my favourite characters, and I was a bit, oh, okay. Hopefully they'll pick up in the third book, but it just seemed a bit abrupt the way they just vanished in the second. And that's something to watch out for. Again, the fight scenes were really good. That is obviously one of Paul Yoder's strong points, is the fight scenes. The sort of battle sequences are the battle sequences are the same as the fight scenes. They're written really well, they're detailed really well, and they're not repetitive, but you do lose, they're a bit detached, because they're not focused on a single character. They're focused on, like, you know, groups of characters. And because you don't have that one sort of focal point, it gets, you feel a bit detached from it. I liked the beginning. I liked where it started off and where I thought it was gonna go. I liked the world building. I liked the one thing I thought that could maybe go back into, and if more books are going to be written in this world, I think it's a great opportunity to examine the use of religion. There's one city that gets spoilers, by the way, for the next like minute. There's one city that gets like taken over by like this religious sect or cult, and I thought it would have been really interesting to sort of examine that in more detail, and hopefully there will be a book in the future that does examine it in more detail. Yeah, in general I would say Lords of the Sands is not as good as the first one. The first one's a lot stronger, I think. I think as a sequel, with the promise of the third book, depending on how the third book is, I think the second one could be alright. But yeah, I did think Shadow of the Arisen was a lot stronger than Lords of the Sands. I think that could just be because of the way that it's written, like the structure of it. I just enjoyed Shadow of the Arisen a wee bit more. I like the potential. Lords of the Sands was kind of left on a cliffhanger, and but it wasn't really effective because you had all the build-up was in the very last chapter, and there was nothing sort of before that, apart from all the dropped storylines, which didn't really have like if there was like a wee bit at the end explaining, you know, what happened to each of them and setting them up for the next book, that would be fine, but they just sort of disappeared, and that's something that I was quite upset by, because I wanted to know what happened. In terms of flaws, both of these books do have a slightly, it's not strange prose, it's very like very typical for high fantasy novels. It's not something I particularly enjoyed myself. I do know people who are into that. It's that kind of almost overwriting, and the reason I don't like it is because it doesn't allow for enough of a build of tension and suspense. So I always find myself when I'm writing, if I want to build up suspense, I'll describe things in more detail to sort of draw it out a wee bit and to build that suspense. But if you're doing that the entire way through, then there's no build up of tension. It's just sort of monotone. I also thought there could be more descriptions in general. I think what it was missing was a really nice sort of overall landscape description. It was never really kind of mentioned. Couldn't really paint a picture in my head, basically, of the settings that they were in. Characters, great, I could do characters, but the actual settings themselves I would have liked a wee bit more on. There wasn't a lot of info dumping, and there wasn't a lot of exposition, which I think is an excellent thing. It takes a real skill to sort of weave in your backstory sort of as you go, and Paul Yoder absolutely excelled at that. I thought that was a brilliant way he managed to do that and get all the information in. Yeah, it was just the sort of overall prose that kind of got me, but I'm not really keen on these high fantasy novels that are like that unless they have like a really good specific concept behind them, and I thought the concept behind this was great. I've never read one that was like a reconnaissance mission before. I've only ever read, you know, like things like Lord of the Rings where they're just going to put I never managed to get through Lord of the Rings, I don't know what I'm saying. I gave up in like book one because of this exact reason of overwriting and too much description. That's my 10-minute review, I guess. I hope it's 10 minutes. Should be. Thank you very much for watching. I'll post a link down to my written review and the Goodreads and Amazon pages if you would like to pick up a copy of this book, in the description below. You can follow me on Instagram and Twitter. That's at writingwerewolf.reads and at writingwerewolf respectively. I post constant updates on what I'm reading and what I'm doing there. borderline annoying, but it's fine, you know, we're all good here. If you enjoyed this video, I have an entire playlist of them, in which they are mostly kept down to 5 minutes, I guess. I'll post a link up above to the playlist, and you can check it out and give them a watch. If you enjoyed it, I would really appreciate if you liked and subscribed. I've fallen off the wagon a wee bit, but I'm planning on posting a video more regularly. I have an entire heap of them that I filmed and just haven't edited, so once I do that, they'll be up regularly, including one about the time that I joined a writing competition on Reddit, coming soon. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you soon.